Hey guys, it's Yuta. So today I want to talk about if you can use anime to learn Japanese, because it's a hot topic now and there's some sort of pseudo debate going on. I said pseudo debate because I don't think there's actually a lot of disagreements here. Many people just read the titles and don't quite pay attention to the actual content. YouTubers often make the titles provocative and sensational because they want views, and newspapers are the same. But the actual content is usually more nuanced, so you shouldn't take the titles literally. Some people also oversimplify the discussion and think this is a either-or question, meaning you can either learn Japanese from anime or you can't. But nobody here is saying that you should never watch anime to learn Japanese, and nobody here is saying that you should only watch anime to learn Japanese and nothing else. It's just a matter of emphasizing different aspects of the kind of Japanese that anime characters speak. Because generally speaking, most anime characters speak Japanese a bit differently from real-life Japanese people, which I explained in another video. But they still speak Japanese and it's not like it's completely different. It's the same grammar and the same-ish vocabulary, because some anime characters use pretty unusual words. I've made videos to explain these differences with specific examples from different anime, so maybe you can watch them if you are curious. But because I explain these differences, some people make assumption that I'm saying that you shouldn't use anime to learn Japanese. That's completely wrong. That's definitely not what I'm saying. わけがわからないよ. I even recommend some anime to people who are learning Japanese. Just because anime characters tend to speak Japanese differently from real-life people, it doesn't mean you can't learn Japanese from them. You can perfectly use anime as one of your study materials and avoid sounding like an anime character in real life. These things aren't mutually exclusive. Also, watching anime doesn't necessarily mean watching anime exclusively and nothing else. You can watch other things too. I recommend learning Japanese from a variety of resources, and anime can totally be part of your resources. The most important thing to do, if you want to be good at Japanese, is get a lot of input. You need to spend thousands of hours listening to or reading Japanese. The input has to be comprehensible, meaning you have to understand enough to know what's going on, even though you don't have to understand 100%. And as long as you're getting a lot of input, what you use exactly isn't as important. I wouldn't say it's completely irrelevant, but being exposed to Japanese is far more important. Whether you use anime 80% of the time or 20% of the time isn't nearly as important as immersing yourself in Japanese. So if you enjoy watching anime in Japanese without subtitles or with Japanese captions, go ahead and watch them. And if you don't have to watch them. There's plenty of things you can watch. And if you want to sound natural, meaning sounding like a native Japanese speaker in real life, you just have to be aware of the differences between anime Japanese and real-life Japanese. Paying attention to these differences is important. And I actually have an interesting example, so let me talk about it. And it's about some Japanese people. I've come across some Japanese people who have lived in an English-speaking country for years and speak English every day, and yet their English is kind of broken. One of the reasons why this happens is that they don't quite pay attention to elements of the language that they don't quite understand. For example, English has articles such as the or a, but Japanese doesn't. So it's not always easy for Japanese speakers to understand how to use them properly. At the same time, even if you mess up with articles, English speakers can probably understand you from the context. If I say, I went to a club with a friend and I had so many fun. It doesn't sound correct, but you can still understand me. You know what I meant was, I went to a club with a friend and I had a lot of fun. And since you can understand me, you probably wouldn't bother correcting me. Because of this, some Japanese people just dismiss articles as not important and don't bother learning how to use them properly. It doesn't matter how many years they've been learning English. But if you're Japanese, you might have to consciously learn how to use them, because these things aren't always easy to just pick up. Of course, it's not wrong to mess up with articles. I can't say otherwise because I do that all the time, unfortunately. Languages are tools, and as long as you can communicate, there's nothing wrong with it. So if you decide to be just good enough and spend your time on something else, that's a valid choice. I'm just talking about sounding natural in this video because I think many people are just interested in that. But if you don't care about sounding natural, that's also a valid choice. And similar things can happen to people who learn Japanese. One of the things that many people find hard is particles. It's not always easy for beginners to understand the differences between そうだよ、そうだね、そうだぜ、そうだわ、そうだわ, and so on. All of these phrases have different nuances, even though the fundamental meaning is kind of the same. So even if you mess up with particles, Japanese people will probably understand and don't bother correcting you. You can be speaking Japanese for years without understanding these particles. Fortunately, this is something you can learn. You just have to pay attention and try. And anime can be a good resource because anime characters tend to use a wide variety of particles. So you can learn a lot from anime, even though you can't obviously learn everything. But even if you are obsessed with anime, there's so many anime-related resources you can use. For example, you can listen to your favorite voice actors speaking Japanese to each other. There's so many radio shows and YouTube videos you already have access to. These are great resources because voice actors tend to speak Japanese quite clearly. You can read anime reviews in Japanese or even discuss anime with Japanese people online. If real-life Japanese is still difficult for you, you can keep watching anime and eventually branch out into different things like Terasa also, even my interview videos with Japanese people. The most important thing is getting a lot of input, and as long as you are exposed to Japanese, you are learning something. So you don't have to stop watching anime. In short, you can totally use anime as part of your learning process, and there's many ways of using anime effectively. But if you want to learn how to speak Japanese like a real-life Japanese person from the start, you should subscribe to my Japanese lessons because I will teach you the kind of Japanese the Japanese people speak today in real life. So click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta. Alright, see you guys soon. Ciao, ciao!